All right, welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now with Jon Rothstein here on CBS Sports Network. Again, want to remind you to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. Once again, we're the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. All right, the second big thing I want to get to today, it's that Arkansas and Kentucky are going in what feels like two different directions. Now, I also want to exercise some caution right now to the Kentucky fan out there that is living and dying on each and every possession. The season is not over because Kentucky lost a home game last night to Missouri that it should have won. Let's clarify that. Let's also clarify something I talked about a couple of weeks ago when Kentucky finally got its roster in place at full strength for the first time. Jaden Quaintance, Jalen Lowe, these players who had missed extended periods of time were finally back in the lineup in December when Kentucky had that big win over St. John's. And last night, Kentucky finally had those players in the starting lineup. I know that last night's game did not go how a lot of people obviously hoped it would go in Lexington, Kentucky. But here's the thing. Kentucky fans may have to come to the realization right now that sometimes, especially in the transfer portal era, and I've said this before, that sometimes because we are seeing a higher volume of commitments in April and May, sometimes because we are seeing commitments happen through social media, with graphics, with announcements, with edit videos, all of a sudden we think all of those commitments are going to be some of the biggest additions we have seen to a program, even if it's a blue blood. It doesn't happen that way. The highest levels of college basketball have high levels of rhythm, chemistry, and continuity. We have seen it even more in the transfer portal era. Kentucky also, and I want to point this out because I think it's especially important, Kentucky last season entered the NCAA tournament with 11 losses and still wound up as a 3 seed on Selection Sunday. Now, did Kentucky last season have a better non-conference resume than it does this season? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that Kentucky is done for the season just because it lost a home game to Missouri. Now, this was the first time that Missouri had ever won a game at Rupp Arena. Full credit given to Dennis Gates and that staff. That staff had a really difficult loss against Illinois before Christmas, a 40-point defeat. Dennis Gates talked about the need to get his team healthy. Missouri has gotten Jaden Stone back, a guy who has really added shooting in the last 2 games. He's had a combined 29 points during that span. He's 5 of 12 during that span from 3. Missouri's a different basketball team now. The first 2 games in the SEC, Missouri has beaten Florida at home and won at Kentucky. Dennis Gates looking at another NCAA tournament appearance for Missouri. But back to Kentucky. At 9-6 overall, the season's been a disappointment. I did not think Kentucky was a top 10, top 12 team to start the season. I thought they were more in the 15 to 20 range. But if you're Mark Pope and you're Kentucky right now, you have to look at the rest of January, and I'm not going to panic, but Kentucky needs to win 4 of its next 5 games. This is what's upcoming for Mark Pope in Kentucky. A home game Saturday against Mississippi State. Then there's 2 road games at LSU and then a hard one at Tennessee. And then Kentucky will come home to take on Texas and Ole Miss at Rupp Arena. Kentucky has to find a way to win 4 out of those 5 games. Because after that, Kentucky goes at Vanderbilt, and then the big one at Arkansas against John Calipari and the Razorbacks, which to me continue to emerge and look like the most complete team in the Southeastern Conference. And look, the season is very, very young. The season is very, very young. It's January 8th. There's a lot of basketball to be played between now and Selection Sunday. But this has a chance to be as proud of a season as John Calipari has had in a long time as a basketball coach. Because obviously he was at Kentucky for a really, really long time. Won a national championship, went to multiple Final Fours, regularly produced players who got drafted in the lottery. He would be the first to tell you that the ending and the games that Kentucky lost in the NCAA tournament were a major disappointment. He would obviously be the first person to tell you that. And sometimes, after a decade and a half, there's an appetite for change. I understand that. But now, in year 2 at Arkansas, 1 year after taking Arkansas to the Sweet 16, Arkansas has a team that is significantly better than the one that beat Kansas and St. John's in the NCAA tournament last year and nearly beat Texas Tech in the Sweet 16. Arkansas is significantly better than it was last year. And the main reason why is the guy at the point of attack in Darius Acuff. And now we are seeing, as we get into January, a player that is becoming appointment television each time he takes the floor. In SEC play, Darius Acuff is averaging 27.5 points and 6.5 assists. He's looking more and more, because of his power, because of his ability to pull up, like a younger version of Stephon Marbury. That's who he reminds me of. And I think you can make the case, and I know that LeBaron Philon is having obviously a great season in Alabama. I know it was really unfortunate that he had to pull himself from the game last night against Vanderbilt, which Vanderbilt won. Vanderbilt moved to 15-0. But I think you can make the case right now, given the way Arkansas is playing, given the way Darius Acuff is playing, Darius Acuff right now looks like he is going to be a major player, not just to be an All-American at the end of the season, but be a major player to be the SEC Player of the Year in 25-26. And coming in to the year, you always want to proceed with a little bit of caution when you talk about what can happen to a freshman point guard and the way that they're going to be portrayed under John Calipari, because in the last 20 years, he's had Derrick Rose, he's had John Wall, he's had Tyreek Evans, Brandon Knight, Marcus Teague, Andrew Harrison, Tyler Ulis, De'Aaron Fox. The list goes on and on and on. And there's a lot of seasons still to be played. But you look at the requisites of this Kentucky team. High-level talent in the backcourt. Acuff, Malik Thomas, a great glue guy in Billy Richmond, maybe my favorite player in all of college basketball, because all he does is win 50-50 plays. Then you have great length up front with Brazile, with Pringle, and with a burgeoning player up front in Malik Ewan, who is a really good reserve. This rendition of John Calipari at Arkansas reminds me a lot of what we saw when he was at Memphis prior to going to Kentucky. And if you obviously remember those years at Memphis, John Calipari went to the Elite Eight in 2006, went to the Elite Eight in 2007, lost to Greg Oden in Ohio State, went to the national championship game in 08, lost to Kansas, and in 09 went to the Sweet 16 and lost to Missouri before taking the job at Kentucky. Darius Acuff is one of the best freshman guards in college basketball, one of the best players in college basketball.